G'day and welcome to Pellowe Talk. It's a special episode of Pellowe Talk Live. Hashtag it's not Q&A. So this week we're actually not having any special political guests in the regular sense that we do with 2 or 3 commentators and a politician. But this week we're actually taking the entire show to officially launch the new website, The Good Source, and I'm very excited about that. It's been in the making for a little while, but we have all of the contributors joining me tonight, except for one exception. Lyle Shelton has had to go to Sydney on an urgent meeting today, and so thankfully it wasn't Victoria, but he's away and will be watching tonight and cheering on, I'm sure, if not in the delay. But let's get to the panel straight away tonight, and there are 8 of us. And for those of you who don't know me, I'm Dave Pellowe, and immediately to my right, I guess, is Mark Powell. And Mark is a pastor of a Presbyterian church in Strathfield, Sydney, and a regular contributor to The Spectator and Cauldron Pool. Any other websites, Mark?
Yeah, Quadrant, the Canberra Declaration.
Quadrant, Canberra Declaration, excellent. All excellent websites. Then we also have, next right again, Karina Oketel. Karina is the past or former vice president of the Liberal Party in Australia, as well as Victoria. And that's pretty impressive. But there's a whole lot more we're going to get to know about everybody tonight. She's a lawyer and currently lecturing in law. Where, Karina?
The College of Law.
The College of Law,
yes.
To postgraduate law students. And to her right, we have Marika Rancy. Marika is also known as, or formerly known as, I don't know if you still want to go by that name, Marika, but political posting mama. So for those say again?
I said perhaps trying to rebrand a little.
Trying to rebrand a little, definitely. So and that's part of what we're going to help with. And we also have current member for the federal seat of Dawson in North Queensland, which encompasses Mackay and parts of Townsville. We have George Christensen. Thanks so much for joining the show and joining the team, George.
Thanks very much, Dave, for the opportunity. It's great to be here in this launch of The Good Source.
And next to him, we have James Macpherson, whose podcast launched just a couple of hours ago, first episode. Make sure you check that out. It's very exciting. And James is currently a vice president of one of Australia's largest Bible colleges with campuses in multiple cities, even in New Zealand. And formerly pastor of a Calvary Christian Church. It was a Calvary Chapel.
Calvary Christian Church.
I did get it right first time. Thank you. Calvary Christian Church, which had 9 campuses from the Sunshine Coast and Townsville all around Australia and even in South Africa, which is pretty exciting. And we also have Bill Muehlenberg, certainly the veteran cultural commentator. And he has got over 5,000 articles on his website. But who's counting, right, Bill?
That's it.
And how many comments have you got from your audience engaged on those 5,000 articles plus?
Well, it depends if you go with the ones I've allowed to go on my website or those that were too, nasty. But there's about 75,000 plus acceptable comments so far on the website.
That's awesome. That's just so huge. So, yeah, real privilege for Bill. And for The Good Source, Bill is going to actually read us one of his articles every week. And so that's going to be a podcast element. That's pretty exciting. We'll talk about that a bit more in a minute. And, of course, we've got Bernard Gaynor bringing up the rear in the bottom right there. And he is a decorated Army veteran with, I believe, 3 tours of Iraq.
Yep, that's correct.
And 3 tours of Iraq with Army intelligence, specializing in Arabic culture and language. and returning home has probably fought more severe battles in defence of Australians' liberty than he ever faced with a foreign enemy, which is something we'll talk about a little bit tonight as well. So his podcast also started this week, which is pretty exciting. So let's kick it off, Mark. Tell us, you've actually tell us a little bit about yourself and your background for those people who are watching for the first time. A brief overview, I guess, of your background, what brought you into ministry, and what brought you into political commentary. You might not have 5,000 articles, but you've certainly got several hundred out there.
Yeah, I'm a long way from Bill Muehlenberg. He's like the top of the tree. I'm just a little sapling at the bottom. Yeah, look, my family's originally from up near George Christensen's neck of the woods in Mackay. Well, before that were what you, I guess, would colloquially call blackbirded from the South Sea Islands. They were what people sometimes refer to as Kanakas. While there's debate about this as to exactly how it all happened, they were essentially, brought over as, slaves on the sugarcane plantations, things like that. My dad moved down. Actually, I was just talking to an auntie last week, and they've got somebody from the Solomon Islands, I think, government that's come out to Australia to sort of research our family tree. And there's a book launch later in the year in November, if we can go there, to talk about our family tree from back there. But my dad came down to Sydney when he was just a young guy to get work, and I think he really instilled in me a sense that there's two ways you can really go with that sort of background. There's one way that you can go, which is just, I don't know, really seeing yourself as a victim, or the other way, which he really encouraged me to go, which was to take responsibility and give to the community. My dad was really proud Australian, loved our country, and just really wanted to give to the community. So, was raised, in a really good home. I don't know how much of the story you want to know, but met my wife while I was at Bible College at Moore Theological College here in Sydney. I've been a pastor for about 20 years, lived in Outback, New South Wales, in Wee Waa for about 7 years, and now I've been back in the inner west of Sydney for the last 14 years. I'm married and we've got 6 kids, so life's pretty busy for us.
6 kids, that's awesome. Tell me what made you start writing cultural commentary, political commentary?
It's a really interesting story, actually. One day, it was a Saturday, I got an email from somebody in my congregation from Burwood Girls High School, which is just the neighbouring high school, just saying, could I please help? Because all the students there were being forced, and there was no opt-out, to watch a film called Gavy Baby. And they weren't just being told to watch this film, but all classes were cancelled, even year 11 and 12, and this is very close to the HSC. And they all had to dress in purple from head to toe. They all had to eat purple cupcakes. They all had to watch the film, and then they all had to have a parade under the rainbow flag. And we sort of protested and just said, how is this in any way freedom of speech? Shouldn't you be presenting both sides of the story, particularly in New South Wales, where you can't introduce controversial political views into the school? That's just indoctrinating children. As it happens, Julie Bishop was visiting the school that day with Craig Launby, and it just hit the media and went viral. We sort of did a little bit of digging, and it was really the first time that we, and I think the community, had heard about this thing called safe schools. And when we looked it up, we were trying to tell politicians about it, and politicians were telling us we can't access all the information about safe schools because it's coming up on the parliamentary servers as porn, and our filters are blocking it. And so we just kept trying to say to everybody through the media, you've just got to go to the website and check out this thing called Safe Schools. This is shocking. This is really, really bad. This is not about an anti-bullying program. This is about indoctrination of kids. So from that point on, I thought, you know what, I'm just going to take every opportunity I can to speak out into the media. And And I think that was the tipping point, really.
Yeah, that's and no turning back. Several hundred articles later.
To give you an idea, and this is before, I would say the plebiscite, but remember, we all know we didn't get that. We got the non-binding voluntary postal survey. This is all before we had that anything to do with same-sex marriage and all that. When that film at Burwood Girls was finally shown on the Friday after school, because Adrian Piccoli, the then education minister, had banned the film, something we had never asked for, the police turned up in their bespoke purple uniforms.
Oh,
now,
dear.
That says to all of the school children, you better vote a certain way, or in the future, you'll be on the wrong side of the law.
Wow.
And that just really showed me, that was one of those tipping point moments where I just thought, wow, Australia is really changing right before our eyes. And if we, the quiet Australians, don't stand up and say something, this juggernaut is just going to run all the way through.
Yeah. Look, it's a very natural segue, I think, to go to Marika and say there was just such a shock and surprise little foray into media for you, which turned you from a ordinary housewife, quote unquote, into a household name with millions of views on one of your videos that you'd put onto a Facebook page. You've just recently shared your story. I'll bring it up and show it, but just recently shared your story on the Good Source. And I loved reading there. I don't think I knew this, but in there you talk about the fact that it had been an attempt to maintain some anonymity and avoid offending your family, which particularly saw you publish this video to a page called Political Posting Mama. How did that turn out?
Yeah, well, I mean, I grew up in a classic social justice warrior leftist home, a broken home actually, and had a quite a significant life change when I was 20 years old, and my values and views with that began to change. And but being very conscious of my family and my friends who I loved and respected, and also having this environment that we all know where some opinions are allowed to be shared and others not so much. I thought, look, I'll just set up this little page, and that's where I can talk about my political stuff, because I was starting to realise that there were some political issues going on. Same experience that Mark mentioned, where I discovered in my kids' schools this program, and I was just mortified when I read the content. And so I set up this page, and I thought, I'm going to name it Political Posting Mama, and I'll be anonymous. And I posted a video, and at the time I had about 300 followers on there. And that video went viral very, very, very quickly, and it was quite a surreal experience. And I actually got mobbed, online mobbed. There were death threats and just thousands and thousands of horrible comments. Very, very. I mentioned in my little article there that generally of quite a sexual nature that would make the hashtag #MeToo movement gasp, except for the fact that I'm a conservative woman. Anonymity didn't last long at all, and I was exposed. I remember I was asked to go on Andrew Bolt's show, and he was trying to get me to say my name, and I was saying, no, I just wanted to still try and claim this anonymity, because I knew that we are in this environment that just will just, tear you to shreds if you don't toe the line. So, yeah, I'm an accidental activist, and I think in those moments you work out pretty quickly you're either a fighter or a flighter, and I didn't realise, I guess, that I'm a fighter. And when they started to call me a liar, I just was convinced that as soon as people saw what I saw, just, reasonable people, if they saw the content and saw it with their own eyes, they would come to the same conclusions as I did. And look, my page quickly grew to about 20,000 people, and I would often get a reach of in fact, most weeks my reach, it would come up, even though I'd be shadow banned by Facebook, I'd get 250,000 would be seeing my posts and content. And so, yeah, it was on. And I guess from there, I recognised that this fight wasn't just about one little program in school. So.
Awesome. So we have Grady here asking for an unashamed plug for all the titles of the podcasts from the presenters, please. Really keen to hear some more Australian conservative views. Well, tonight is one big unashamed plug for all the presenters, Grady. So thanks for the question. What we are doing, looks like we're having connectivity troubles with George Christensen. So in and out a bit, but we got you back, George. So right at this stage, everybody's podcasts, because we're doing like weekly podcasts, we're actually going to put them all on the Good Source podcast platform. And so you'll just be able to look that up, look for Good Source, SAUCE, in your preferred podcast platform. So Google, Spotify, Apple, and StreamYard as well. And head to the webpage, goodsource.news, SAUCE, goodsource.news, and you'll also be able to see them shared there as they come out, embedded in actual posts. So, yeah, we're going to, with all of us contributing to the one podcast channel for now, we may diversify a little bit later, but it means there'll be more activity on the one podcast channel, and you can browse through the list and listen to those that you want to hear. While we're talking about things you can opt in and out of on the Good Source website, you will also, let's just have a look at that. You'll also be able to have a look at what your preferences are for email. So get the email updates you prefer, just pop in your details. And you can choose whether you want a monthly wrap-up because you just get too many emails already, or if you want an update every week on the content that's being released by this panel. And you can just choose if there's any in particular that you want to hear from more often or less often. And that's all right. None of us will be offended. That's why we're working as a team, because I know there's a bunch of shows with multiple personalities on, and I just want to listen to one or two of them. And that's good. I listen to them, and other people listen to others. So any other thoughts on that, guys? Any comments there? No, everybody's happy. Awesome. Karina, why don't you tell us a little bit about you? You've got a really interesting background. You've done everything. You've been everywhere. You must be 50 years old with the fullness of life you've already lived.
And it's called makeup.
And yet you look 15.
Well, I guess I've been someone who's been an advocate from a young age, and that's really the reason why I went on to study law and then to work for legal aid. But I very quickly realised that you can only achieve so much working within the law to see actual change happen that is done by the policymakers. So I joined the party most aligned to my values, the Liberal Party, the party of small business, of freedom, of family. I then stood for local council and was elected and became a deputy mayor. I stood as a Senate candidate for the Liberal Party in 2016, and I was elected a vice president of the party here in Victoria and also at the federal level. Now, I've never shied away from a campaign. I've always been a campaigner, whether it was advocating against cluster munitions or people with disabilities or for human rights. So when our party federal president came out in support of same-sex marriage, I knew as a vice president I couldn't be silent. And in entering that debate, I got to experience serious hate like never before. I have experienced racism in my life, but I discovered that racists have nothing on the way that the left hate conservatives. That hatred is absolutely vile. It's abusive. It's dehumanizing. It is quite incredible. But my husband did tell me that if people aren't hating on you, then you really aren't standing up for anything significant. So I took courage from that, and I continued to voice my conservative opinions. I hadn't previously thought that I was a conservative. I didn't consider myself as such. After all, I was a legal aid lawyer. I met my husband while I was volunteering in Uganda. But what used to be common sense is now the new controversial or the countercultural and is conservative. And so it's, my pleasure to be able to join this incredible team to be one of the countercultural, the provocateurs, just by simply speaking the truth, which is, I suppose, a very strange thing to come to terms with, that just talking common sense, speaking the truth is suddenly controversial. It
is. It's a very unfortunate indictment. And we saw just today that Channel 9 program in the morning, the Today Show, said that Pauline Hanson is no longer welcome on their show because of the way she spoke and the things she said. And it's like debate has gone out the window. Now we're only going to allow on people that we agree with, because to allow on somebody who we think is wrong is in itself a crime. And the intellectual dishonesty and arrogance of that is just breathtaking. And I mean, she might have said it with not the greatest dosage of compassion, but she said, like, she was accused of ignorance, essentially, and getting all her facts wrong, and yet it was exactly the same things that Daniel Andrews and the Victorian Health Department were saying about, even methadone needing to be supplied to these apartment clinics, and so sure, she isn't the most gracious and flowery in her speech, but she wasn't uninformed at all. She was just repeating what the government was saying. But this is the media that we're trying to provide an alternate to. They will determine what their audience is capable of hearing, and if they think they don't think very much of us as viewers as unable to sort out fact from fiction for ourselves. They need to look after it. So it's so patronizing and condescending. It's just insulting. George, how's your internet connection going? It looks like we've got a frozen picture of you.
Oh no, he's a statue. Watch out, they're going to tear him down.
It's a poster and George is off making coffee. James, you're actually, your article is the feature on the website at the moment as the latest published. And that's a very handsome photo of you. Well done. Well done to your graphic designer.
I think my son took that.
That's awesome.
Really?
Excuse, I think that's George trying to come in, but it's really bad and really digitized. George, you might need to connect to 4G instead of Wi-Fi.
Right. Yeah.
Oh, we got you good then. The right. Yeah. I'll just talk to James for a second because your picture is actually completely frozen. So we'll see if you can get a better connection and come back to you. But James, the Evelyn Ray says check out the smolder on that great photo from you kids. Look, one of the things I want to give credit for, and actually I'm just going to talk a little bit, James, before. Is George noises coming through? We will come right back with George in a fresh connection, hopefully. Look, some background. Bernard approached me, might have been a year ago, and had this great idea that we should do something like what the Good Source is now. And I was keen. I was interested, and we got to talking about it and how it would work and how we would structure it. And spoke to a few different people and said, hey, how would you like to contribute? And there was great interest, and then essentially we were just both flat out, and Bernard especially tied up with serial litigants occupying most of his time, and we said, look, timing's not right for this. Let's just put it on the back burner and see what happens later. And then, I thought timing was good a couple of months ago, that it was something that I could pick up and run with again, and rang Bernie and said, how should we go forward in this? And Bernie, I think you said something along the lines of, I'm basically just as busy as I was before, so can't really help run it, but can contribute occasionally. Is that about right? Oh, you're muted. I forgive you. No, that was you.
I'm here, Dave. Yes, that's basically the story. I'm still stuck in courts in a state I don't even live in. But, this is a great idea. I'm very happy to see it get off the ground and keen to contribute.
Hey, Bernard, how many times have you been taken to court?
I've had 37 complaints from a single activist in New South Wales since 2014.
That's just...
And I hear often, I've heard this said a lot, that often the process is the punishment. And that's how a lot of people work, is that just taking you through that court system is the way they punish and suppress free speech. Would you agree?
Absolutely. And it's not just that the process is the punishment. These activist complainants know that. So in my case, this complainant has lodged 16 complaints that he has then gone on to withdraw for no reason whatsoever. No costs attached to it at some point in the process, either once the investigation has started or even after it's got to the courts. He just pulls the plug on the complaints. They know they can make you dance through the process, and they just withdraw complaints. It shows how vexatious it is.
Forgive me for asking if this is too personal a question, but what's the costs been like that to you financially? Because I've heard it's been astronomical.
My legal fees for these complaints are getting pretty close to $400,000 now. And they'll tip over 400 very soon.
Yeah. And I mean, how do you finance the defense of that? Is that just, do people help you? Is this just all personal, coming out of your own personal account?
No, look, there's no way I could have paid these costs. So we did sell a house in 2018. A couple of years ago, but I've been very lucky that many thousands of Australians have donated to help me get to court, and I have no doubt that without their support and generosity, this would have gone the way of many other complaints. The system is designed for guilty verdicts, I guess. The thought police never believe anyone is innocent, but I've been able to fight it, and so far, of those 37 complaints, 32 have now been dismissed or withdrawn. There's still 5 left, and I'm still fighting them. But I'm confident that I'll succeed in that.
Yeah, the reason I ask you is, for me, you're a bit of a hero in our country in terms of fighting for free speech, because free speech is no longer free.
It's very expensive.
It's very expensive to stand up. I know it's just one of the comments coming through by Stephen Chavera. I think he's right. The way you've been treated is utterly shameful, and it is a blight on our legal system. And it's good to see people like Mark Latham and others I know. It'd be interesting to hear what Karina thinks about this too, because being the legal expert. But I just think the way that activists have used the legal system to punish people is like Stephen Chavera is saying, it's shameful.
Yeah.
Well, the whole system is corrupt. So the complainant in my case has stated that he's facing his own financial issues. He stated that he's been lodging complaints to harass me in the hope that I will come to a financial settlement with him that will cover his debt to a third party. I've got the emails where he's saying that to the party he owes money to. It's outrageous. But the thing I find most shocking of all about this is that the New South Wales Anti-Discrimination Board know this is going on, and not only do they ignore it, but in my response to these complaints where I provide this evidence, the Anti-Discrimination Board has removed those emails and describe them as irrelevant when it sent their complaints to the tribunal. It's corrupt.
Yeah. I went down to Tasmania a couple of years ago. My denomination flew me down to go see a guy called Campbell Markham, who's a Presbyterian minister in Hobart. And while I was down there, I also saw the Catholic Archbishop of Hobart, Julian Porteous. And the interesting thing was they're both before the Human Rights Commission down there. And it's not because the person that took them there was offended themselves. They got there on the basis that other people could be offended. That's how crazy it is.
Yep.
So they were actually protesting on the behalf of other people, hypothetically. Which
Yep.
The whole system is designed. In fact, I think you mentioned early on in your introduction about your family background that we got a choice of living life in a positive fashion or choosing to live in misery, I guess. And this whole system is designed to perpetuate this idea that we are victims for everything and anything. It's designed to make people feel like victims. Even the complainants spend their lives thinking that they're victims. It's ridiculous.
Yep.
Yeah, look, I think there was an episode we did, the other week, Dave. I just wanted to say, when we interviewed on the panel Jacinta Price, as well as Warren Mundine and Anthony Dillon. It's really great to see there's Indigenous people in our country that are starting to speak up and starting to say, look, like another person I'm about to interview, hopefully in the next week or so, is Bindi Kolchoka. And if
brilliant.
people watching this haven't seen her, you should just go to YouTube, look up Bindi Kolchoka. Just fantastic for just saying, look, this is a woman that before had taken Andrew Bolt to court, and then in the process of actually coming to faith in Christ and actually ended up asking Andrew Bolt for forgiveness for what she did. But here's the key is she said, look, I don't want to be defined by my victimhood. I want to actually be an active member of society and contribute. And that's what we've got to get to. I think that's what conservatives too are fighting for, is just to say, like Karina was saying earlier, conservative values are really common sense values. But the problem is common sense is not that common anymore. And so what was once just common sense is now seen as absolutely radical.
Yep. It is amazingly rare how rare common sense is. I was listening to George Christensen's most recent podcast episode where he was interviewing Dr. Peter Ridd, somebody who's been on Pellowe Talk in the past, and has got a lot of media out there, and it's just incredible. The judge in the case where his university was trying to censor him from disagreeing with other employees basically said, this is ridiculous. He's an academic. He should be able to say what's true. If we don't have academic freedom in our universities, why is the government subsidizing them? There was some really good points there, but the frighteningly, the university's fighting it and taking it to the federal court or Supreme Court. So it's not over now, as Matt Patterson says. Common sense is now exceptional. But one of the David Spong says, how many like Bernard and indeed Cardinal Pell would be punished even more unjustly if they had no access to the huge funds needed to use the court system? That's just so true. This is the tragic thing about our legal system is how disadvantaged someone without money is. Truth and justice don't seem to have as much to do with the outcome as good defence. An expensive defence, it would seem. So people like you, Karina, who've been in legal aid, helping out is really, really good. I do want to get back to James, but I was just segueing there the scenic route from essentially saying the Good Source is definitely not a one-man show. We are a team, and it was really an idea started by Bernie so long ago. And together we thought, we actually registered a lot of domains under the name of The Quiet Australian, thinking that would be a good name for such a platform of the kind of people who would vote any way other than left, typically. And then I asked Bernie, hey, Bernie, do you mind if I run with that name? He said, sure, very generously. But I thought, you know what, I actually want to include New Zealand politics and American politics and not just be exclusive to Australian. Obviously, the founding members are all Australian, so that's definitely there. Trying to bring George back in. He's switched machines and hoping that's the very well. And that's actually synchronized with your audio and video.
Yeah. I just have to fight off the Chinese that were attacking my systems here.
No doubt. We'll come to that inquiry in just a moment. But speaking of the teamwork that we've got here, as I'm looking for another name and floating it out, James Macpherson and his boys came up. I think, James, you told me you were brainstorming potential names one morning when you came up with something that eventually became the Good Source. So credit to you for. I've been getting compliments for the name, but public disclaimer: it's all the Macpherson men who worked on it together.
Well, I've just learned if you want to know anything, ask a 15-year-old because they will know.
And in this case, it's true. So rarely true, but yeah. Let's have a look at. Did we have a look at your podcast yet? I think we did. We just had a look at that picture, didn't we, James? Why don't you tell us a bit about your podcast, what your plan is, what's that gonna look like every week that people can look forward to?
Look, my background is journalism. I've only ever wanted to do two things in my life, be a journalist and a pastor. I've done them both and I'm not even 50 yet, so I feel like I've peaked early. But one of the difficulties when I was leading a church was you've got to be very careful what opinions you express, because obviously you've got a very diverse congregation, which you want. But I started tweeting in order to express some of my thoughts. And
you did.
I really wasn't tweeting for anybody else. It was really just to amuse myself. And most of my tweets were just thoughts that came to me as I was reading the news. As a former journalist, I find it very interesting the way things are framed. These days, the news is not so much reported as managed and massaged. And what I found was that numbers of people, some of them quite prominent, both in Australia and overseas, would come to me and say, we love your Twitter feed. We would never say those things, but we love that someone is saying it. And so it sort of grew from there. And I guess I am fascinated, as I said, by the way the media frame issues, because framing is everything. I'm also intrigued by the fact that many people have feelings deep inside but don't know how to express them. But then when someone else is able to express them or summarize them, there's like an aha moment that happens in people's hearts. And they say, that's exactly what I've been thinking. I just didn't know quite how to express it. And I think if we can give people tools not only to understand the news, but tools to be able to speak about it intelligently and to express what they know in their heart is true, but it's difficult to express it when political correctness has deliberately and systematically removed the language and the vocabulary to be able to express many of the things that we as Christians and conservatives feel. So, and on top of all of that, I just think most of the news is hilarious. If you want a good laugh, read the newspaper. It's full of laughter, if it wasn't so tragic, most of it. So my podcast, every week, we're going to take a look at the news that was, and part of it will be a bit of mockery, because I think there's no better way to dismantle bad ideas than to make fun of them, but also maybe to put them in context and see how they line up with common sense and, of course, the Word of God and a Christian worldview.
Yeah, that's brilliant. Look, one of the things I want to explain for people is that the Good Source is ultimately a free speech platform. Now, that doesn't mean it's a wall for street artists to come and vandalize whatever ridiculous rubbish they want. I will be curating it to a certain extent. But what I do mean is that I'll be welcoming people who I disagree with. I don't know if anybody caught the episode of Pellowe Talk Live a couple of weeks back with Mark Latham and John Anderson and Joe Hildebrand and Karina Barraclough, but I loved having Joe Hildebrand on. He was almost a token lefty, but that would diminish his value as an individual. But in a panel, it was just so great to have a conversation with somebody who could disagree with you intelligently and civilly, and not reduce and devolve the conversation to insults, slander. And, he did dish out a few cheesy slogans, but he took it on the chin when those were called out as such, meaningless, empty slogans. And so, yeah, we definitely look forward to having debates here. Last week, Karina and Senator Malcolm Roberts had a really great debate about Labor versus, minor parties versus major parties, and just how disappointing the Liberal Party really is. Which Karina says not at all.
Hold on. No. And reflecting back, I didn't have a go at One Nation. I could have said so much about One Nation, but I held back because, in the spirit of, everyone coming together and fighting the good fight together, that I think is more important. But, I've been thinking about it all week. I just want to have another go at him.
I think Malcolm would be happy to come back and have that conversation.
You were the token lefty on that show, Karina.
Yeah, that's right. You did push back quite well when he said the Liberal Party was a socialist party. But there's
when Joe Hildebrand's your most left wing person, you got a good setup, and when the Liberal Party's left wing, I got to tell you, that's a pretty good setup too. I wish the party was. I wish the Liberal Party was the most left wing party in Australia. That'd be great.
There's here we go. Here's a comment I saw before from MJack. The LNP has been rebranded to the Malcolm Turnbull Party. They have just changed leaders. We'll take that as a comment.
That's nonsense. That's nonsense.
All right. Push back, George.
Yeah, look, it is nonsense. I mean, Malcolm Turnbull is gone. His history, and you can clearly see from the kind of leader that Scott Morrison is that he is certainly not Malcolm Turnbull. He is a conservative at heart. He's in the mould, I think, of John Howard, where you've got someone who's got conservative principles but pragmatic at the same time. And so, politics is politics. It's it's an ugly business where it's like making the sausage. You don't want to see how it's done. You won't eat the sausage, and it's the same with democracy. You have to sort of give way to some things. It can't just be all in the one direction. But there is no way that you could say that the LNP is now this sort of limp green party. It's anything but.
Anything but. Well, this will be the chorus. My refrain of every song I sing will be join it to make it better. Don't join it because it's a perfect fit for you or has arrived. It's perhaps a long way from its destination, and the more critical you are of it, I think probably the more imperative your membership may become to help influence pre-selections so that less people like Malcolm Turnbull can get anywhere successfully, and more people like you. The Conservative Party should be populated with Conservatives. Yeah. Hey, look, on what James said about the media, I've got this little clip on the support page for the Good Source, which I think pretty well sums up the reason Good Source exists. When the leftist media will report on President Trump or somebody right of centre, it doesn't matter what else happens that day. They will find any tiny malicious detail to try and report on. So whatever was going on in the Rose Garden when they were serving out ice cream, CNN chose to make the headline, President gets 2 scoops of ice cream, everyone else gets 1.
Is that for real? Is that an actual CNN?
Oh, you don't remember that? No, that's for real. That was the news for a full news cycle for 24 hours. Everybody got 1 scoop of ice cream, but President Trump asked for 2 and got it. Like, scandal. We can't get him on Russia. We'll get him on ice cream. It was just absolutely ridiculous. How far they go to crucify.
Derangement syndrome has nothing on COVID-19. Well, COVID-19 has nothing on Trump derangement syndrome.
Tell me about it. Look, I want to give a honourable mention to our missing comrade in arms, and that is Lyle Shelton. So his book is available at lyleshelton.com.au. There's not a link on the Good Source yet, but we will fix that and make that happen. So that's a really good book to get, because you need to learn from history, and he's definitely written from 20 years of experience, first in journalism like James, then in local council, local government like Karina, and then moving on to the Australian Christian Lobby, where he served for 10 years and half of that time as its managing director, sharing the stage with Karina at the National Press Club for one of their lunches to present the case for holding fast with the definition of marriage. There's a lot of insights into that which we can glean, a lot of what goes on and behind the scenes. I'm looking forward to getting into this. This is my copy, and Lyle has, let's have a look at that, what it looks like. Lyle's podcast and videos are available on The Good Source, and this particular episode, he talks, that was such a fantastic scene, worth giving up any monetization ability to have a few seconds of this wonderful scene from Monty Python, where the guy wants to be a woman and is like, well, I can't remember what the line is. Let's see if I can find it. There we go.
I think it was, you don't have a womb.
Don't you oppress me? I'm not oppressing you, Stan. You haven't got a womb. So really good podcasts there from Lyle. Head to thegoodsource.news to watch a couple of those from Lyle. Third one hopefully won't be too far away. Bill, let's talk about your show. You've got a few articles up already. I think it's 3 we've got for you so far, including your most recent one, America's Independence Day and the Christian Connection. And when you click on one of Bill's articles, they will automatically start being read to you in Bill's dulcet tones.
How good is that?
Well, I told my wife today that I couldn't really understand why anybody would be all that excited about listening to me read my own articles, but presumably there's some out there who will be. I think this is just the first step. I think Dave wants me to get the whole, video gear and a proper setup, and then you'll see me reading my pieces. So not sure if that's going to turn on people or turn them off, but easy enough, the content at least. Do at least an article a day. So 15 years of writing, so that's 5,000 to choose from. We just pick some relevant piece, read it off and post it on the site here. So we'll see what we do. Reading today, video tomorrow, maybe a song and dance routine in the near future, but hopefully we'll keep the gang entertained, but also provide some good content.
I love that on the where are we? That's your show, James. I want to go back to the homepage. I love that on the homepage we have managed the remarkable feat of getting a hippie into a coat.
That was a big ask, I tell you.
I asked Bill to bring a couple of coats as an option, and he laughed at me.
A couple of coats. What, I got to go out and buy one or borrow one? And no, I hate to say this, young Dave, but that coat, of which I look all very dashing and handsome, I actually bought that thing at a op shop for $5 a few years ago. There it is, and it seems to do the trick. So come on, old hippies, we don't have a lot of coats and jackets and suits.
There is nothing wrong with op shop clothes.
The big question is, Bill. The big question is, did you have the shoes on or the Birkenstocks?
Well, mind you, I was going to come with my typical sandals, but Dave had threatened that a possible full-length shot would be taken. So I actually had to have shoes and socks on. I was shocked,
I love in this where I'm just trying to find. Here we go. Your article on the radical left and the war on police. You admit that back in your wild youth, you would often be heard shouting, "Off the pigs," because you and your radical left counterculture friends hated all forms of authority. So just give us a bit of an introduction. For those people who've never heard of Bill Muehlenberg before, why would you hate authority? You were a radical leftist. How did you go from calling to kill police to being a contributor to the Good Source?
Good question. Look, when you get old, your mind starts to get, turns to mush. So you could easily forget things. But of interest, just a few hours ago, I actually penned a 3,000-word piece on this very matter for another excellent group. Warwick Marsh had asked me to do a 10-year anniversary piece on the Canberra Declaration. I've been involved in that since day one. Actually, I wrote the Canberra Declaration, and then a team of others, did bits and pieces to it. So in about a week, he's going to have this 10-year anniversary session with Canberra. So he wanted me to reminisce, my own story, Canberra Declaration story. So yeah, it's been quite fresh in my mind as of just a few hours ago. A messed up hippie on the search. Long story short, the whole scene, the drug culture, the new left, radical politics, selling drugs in high school, getting kicked out of high school, editing underground newspaper, the whole bit. But obviously a change has occurred, and that was a conversion to Christ when I was 18. Suicidal, a drug addict, and a lot of my friends didn't make it. A lot of my friends did die, either of suicide or drug overdose. So, I ask often God, why me? And of course, every time I speak, including now, I say, well, God wanted me to be on Dave's show in 2020. So that's one of the reasons why he brought me out of the hole that I was in. So, I've had a change of heart, obviously, on a lot of my beliefs. But as I said in that piece for Canberra Declaration, back as a hippie, I think God had put it into me, a love of truth, a love of justice. Like I said, I was writing and editing underground newspaper. So guess what? God took those gifts and talents, if you will, put them into me when I wasn't even a Christian, and then became a Christian, and obviously put those skills to good use with 5,000 articles. So it's amazing grace kind of story, and so still the passion for truth, for justice, but obviously the focus is a bit better, standing on a more solid foundation instead of the sinking sand, and hopefully God is making use of myself and others here for his kingdom.
Brilliant. Thanks so much, Bill. We got quite a few comments. I'm just going through here. Loving you. Meek Screwen from Western Australia on last week says, Bill, absolute champion. Matthew Patterson says, Bill writes faster than what I can read. Bindi Cole Chocker says, you're a legend. So great to see you all tonight. Well done. And then Stephen Shavura starts something that's got everybody going. He says, Bill Muehlenberg actually sounds a lot like Trump, and I'll never unhear that. Meeks replies, now I can't either. So what do you think, guys? Should we get Bob Catter on the Good Source? be good for a bit of entertainment. I've got his number and his media person. We should see what happens. I met him at Townsville Airport once. I didn't have time to hang around, but I was watching him do an ABC interview, and my goodness, it was entertaining. Just watching him just rip into these journos, like he just really doesn't care at all. So yeah, very good.
Dave, I've spent a bit of time with Bob. And,
you have, haven't you?
Absolutely, absolutely. If nothing else, it'll be entertaining.
You want to put in a good word for me? Does he still take phone calls from you?
I don't know if Bob still takes phone calls from me. You might want a good word from someone else.
Errol Bryant says, anyone notice the similar temperaments between Black Lives Matter and Extinction Rebellion protesters?
Absolutely. And not just that, safe schools. You know, what do they all have in common? I know Bill Muehlenberg has talked a lot about this really well, but I did an interview last week with Dr. Stephen Trevera, which is up on the Good Source. If you haven't seen it, I'd really recommend it. It's just really what do they all have in common is cultural Marxism. In fact, it's so common now, I've called my segment cultural Marxisms, just because I think that's the zeitgeist. That's the spirit of our age. You know, Ros Ward, who was the architect behind safe schools, she was an out-and-out Marxist. You know, wanted to see, you know, the red flag above Parliament, not, you know, the Australian flag. And it's the same thing, you know, with Black Lives Matter. It is an explicitly Marxist organisation, which is anti-family, anti-capitalism. And this is one of the big challenges facing our society today. I was talking to another Christian leader just today, and he made I think the really prescient observation that the greatest heresy really facing the church, the Christian church today, in all of its different denominations, is the social justice gospel. It's like the liberation theology in Latin America, of the 1960s, 70s, 80s. The social justice movement that's coming through the church at the moment, and it's often met with such undiscernment or lack of discernment, I think is a great cause for alarm. And it'd be interesting to actually hear Bill talk more about that, because I know you've written quite a bit on this yourself, haven't you, Bill?
Well, I have, partly because I was one. I was a Marxist back in my wild youth, but obviously I've followed it quite a bit since, and that really does tie so much of what we see together, no question. They come from the same school, as you say. They have the same ideology. Their end game is the same. They really don't like us. They don't like the West. They don't like Christianity. They don't like conservatives. They don't like authority. They don't like pretty much everything we hold near and dear. So, yeah, they're all on the same page. They're working toward the same end. It's the old, evolution taking over from within instead of revolution from without. So Gramsci and the whole gang, and it's working almost according to plan. It's going all very well. When you study their documents, you see, these guys have been thinking about this for a long time. They've been working at it, and they do put so many of us Christians and conservatives to shame simply because we're asleep at the wheel. We're not really committed and active, but they are, and that's why they keep winning so often.
Yeah. Kerry L says, so good to have great Aussie minds coming together to produce a relevant local news source. Thanks, Kerry. Look, one of the things that I have to invite you to do is to become a supporter, to join the team. And on the support page on the website, we've written, it's more important than ever to have independent voices in the media who don't filter the news through the lens of cultural Marxism, dividing nations between imaginary classes of the oppressed and the oppressors. Such an immense enterprise as this is not sustainable and cannot grow without your monthly support, so we can confidently plan essential production and promotion budgets. So, guys, just to explain this, if you can head to thegoodsource.news and click on the support button. what we're looking for is a whole bunch of people to contribute a small or large monthly amount just to help us provide some certainty in the budget. We've got 9+ shows that we're hoping to bring to you every week and continue with research and writing, etc. And one of the things that's going to be very, very important is to have more than one person doing all the production. We're going to need office space, and we're going to need probably 2 or 3 full-time staff to keep up with the production level. If we want to replace the mainstream media, there's no chance of fixing it or redeeming it. The government's never going to defund the ABC, and so we've basically got to abandon ship and build a new one from the ground up. And there's plenty of conservative media out there that we need to support. But if this one is going to tick any of the boxes for you, I'm going to suggest that you should be supporting more than one. But would you consider becoming a supporter of the Good Source with a small or large monthly amount? And that way we can make sure that we don't just produce 9 shows, but we actually keep building and building and building. I want to share with you that one of the goals that I have for the Good Source, the vision, is to actually grow to the point where we can employ journalists. I was talking about this with Lyle Shelton, and we were dreaming, wouldn't it be wonderful if we could pay for a journalist to actually go and hang out at the Federal Parliament House in Canberra and start asking the kind of questions that help frame the agenda for the things that we want to see discussed in politics, instead of getting the softball questions to the lefties and ridiculous questions about climate change to the conservatives. Let's start asking serious questions like, why is it okay to take my tax dollars and help a woman kill her baby? Why is it okay that we are subsidizing the deaths of 80 to 100,000 Australian citizens a year? I don't know why no journalist has ever asked that, but let's start framing that. But what if we can then, with a team of journalists and production staff, actually create a whole new nightly news bulletin to bring you the news? I think one of the biggest things we could do to solve racial tensions in this country is stop watching the mainstream media. They're constantly telling us how racist we are and how oppressed everyone is. And I think half the people in Australia wouldn't be so upset about racism if they hadn't been told they were experiencing it, because it's so much of a self-fulfilling prophecy, the racial division that goes on here. There's a lot to do, but we certainly can't do it by ourselves. And so we're working together as a team, and just invite you to join the team. Dip in and see what you can do. Many monthly supporters will make this light work, and we'll be able to actually build a conservative media in Australia. At this stage, there's no paywalls, and it would be fantastic for that to be the case, for absolutely everybody to be able to access all of the honest, objective, conservative reporting that we plan on doing. And, we'll be sorting opinion from news. And at this stage, there's obviously a lot more space for opinion. But yeah, that'd be really great if you could just head over to the Good Source. Sorry, not the Good Source. It's just goodsource.news, SAUCE. So the first goal is to try and raise $5,000 a month. And so that's 500 people contributing $10 a month each. Shouldn't be too hard if we're doing a half decent job. So any thoughts from you guys on that? Do we want to add to anything that I just said?
I'll jump in. I think, one of my major concerns that keeps me awake at night is I've come to the realisation that not all civilisations last forever. And unfortunately, too many of us have been, myself included, too quiet for too long, and we've allowed the long march through the institution to be successful, and we're seeing it in every institution. And I guess that's the other article that I posted on my site. I think you've got that up, Dave. And so I'm incredibly passionate about what we're doing here. I mean, my main passion is family. That's where I jumped in on this. I saw the fierce attack on families, and I felt so strongly as a countercultural stay-at-home mum to the feminist movement. I'm just not represented anywhere. So this is a fantastic platform and an opportunity to actually take back some ground. And so I want to encourage everyone to support where you can. Not everyone, I understand it, not everyone wants to get out and be vocal and be loud about it, but there is an opportunity. Everyone can do their bit. And it's only been a bunch of activists, really. I mean, I remember when I first got mobbed and it felt like the whole of Australia was against me. And someone actually said to me, look, there's only a couple of thousand. And it's true. I think I know them all by name, and they make up multiple accounts, but they come back again. But they've been very, very organised, and that's all it is. And I don't think they are the majority. I really, truly don't. I do think the Quiet Australia is a thing. And so, it's time to take back some ground wherever we can, and stand up. So, yeah, if people can chip in, I think this is going to be huge. I was so excited to join this team because I know everyone, I've watched everyone. These are the real deal, people who will not compromise. And I'm someone who, I'm a member of I'm going to agitate a little bit because I was reading some of the comments. I'm someone who joined the Liberal Party because I recognised, unfortunately, that in order to change policy, you have to change the policy makers. And so I actually went in quite ideologically excited about the fact that if we just get enough numbers in, you can topple the top. And I've become very, very disheartened. And I've never been in an organisation with so many haters. People hate me in the organisation. I'm not there because I love it. But, the reality is, unless we actually start to take back ground and get involved and, what future do our children have? I mean, that's what I'm in it for. I'm in it for my children. And sometimes it'd be much easier for me to go away and live the quiet life. But at the end of the day, we are in a war. It's a war of freedom, to fight for our freedom. And, the Marxists have definitely taken hold. I mean, look, there's a civil war pretty much happening in the United States of America, and I don't think we're far behind here. Enough's enough, and it's, easy to kind of ignore the problem, I guess, and live your day-to-day life. But at the end of the day, it's time to make a stand because our kids are worth it.
Yeah, definitely.
Yep.
We have John Rowe, who says, hi from South Africa. The citizens of Australia are lucky to have this group of people standing up for conservative values. All the best to you. Thank you, John. Appreciate that. Risa Hand says, love you, Bill. And we've got Mama saying, have you considered including Advance Australia in your venture? Some good ideas coming from their group. Yes, there are. And yes, we have. Liz was on Pellowe Talk Live 2 weeks ago. So you'll have to go back and have a look at that. It's on the YouTube channel, youtube.com/Dave Pellowe. I actually should put these live episodes dated for their appropriate dates on the Good Source website as well. I'll try and get onto that so you can watch those. But the whole back catalogue of past live shows are some good interviews and good panels there are on youtube.com/Dave Pellowe. Graham McLennan is apparently signing a comment on his wife's YouTube account. Keep it up. So that's very good. Look, I want to continue just with the introductions. Lots of chatting is great fun. But having recently, in the last half hour or so, overcome the difficulties of a possible Chinese spyware attack, security breach on his personal laptop, George Christensen's internet is now up and running and stable. So, George, tell us, come back to the China inquiry and why you're not their favourite person right now. But start with, I guess, growing up on a cane farm.
Yeah, well, firstly, I can't blame the Chinese. I think it's just a crappy laptop. But anyway,
For the record,
might
we're
have-
not blaming the Chinese.
I have to check whether it was made in China. That might be the reason why. But anyway, but look, my background, I mean, apart from the experience of growing up in regional Queensland, in Mackay on my grandparents' cane farm, I too have a background as a journalist, so it's sort of infectious throughout this program here, Dave. I studied as a journalist, university, worked as a journalist for a few years, then went into PR, and now I'm a politician for all of my sins. So that's basically the short version of the background. And I guess that what I'm doing at the moment, and it hasn't moved across yet to the good source, but it's going to. There's a page that I have at the moment, conservative1.com, which is hosted on my own website, but it will be very soon going over to your page, Dave, where I've interviewed a lot of people, and it's about some of the big issues of our times. In fact, I've interviewed Bill Muehlenberg. He gave a great discussion on cultural Marxism, one of my very first interview subjects. And it's topics like that, but there has been a steady focus on China throughout it. I've interviewed people such as one of the former US generals, Robert Spalding, who wrote a fantastic book called Stealth War on China, and recently interviewed a number of Hong Kong pro-democracy activists who are probably in hiding right now, I've got to say.
I really liked your interview with Gavin Ashenden. That was good.
Gavin Ashenden, I don't know what title to give him. He's a doctor, a PhD. He was a former chaplain to the Queen, which is pretty special in itself. He infamously quit the Church of England at the point where some, insipid lefty liberal priest in the Church of the Episcopal Church in Scotland, which is basically the Church of England and Scotland, although they'd probably kill you for saying that. But he read the Quran out in a church service, and he read the Quran on the Epiphany, the Feast of the Epiphany. And the verse of the Quran he read out was the one that was signifying that Jesus was not divine. And I guess that there was a light bulb moment for him, and he just had to resign. So he quit altogether the Church of England. He's now probably becoming a Roman Catholic priest. He's certainly a Roman Catholic layman at this point in time. But he had, that's a fantastic interview. And everything that Gavin Ashenden says, I subscribe to. It's what other people have reiterated here on this show. We're living through some really, really dark times right now. I'm actually pretty scared for the future, to be quite honest. Marika says that we should be fighting back. My concern is that actually it's probably too late, and there's going to be ashes at the end of this experience, and it's what we build up from the ashes after that. That's pretty doom and gloom. But I think that what we're seeing with, people wanting to topple statues over, the comment was made before about the Black Lives Matters movement and the Extinction Rebellion. Extinction Rebellion, their whole thing is that mankind should not exist, or at least exist in the form that it is now. These are destructive movements that have got such the upper hand, and it's very, very scary where we're going. So they're the kind of issues that I'm going to be focusing on. China in particular, just to go back to that, because that is a real big existential threat to the West right now. Honestly, there's the issue of China, combined with that, the own internal struggle, which is leading to the fall of Western civilization. And then there's daylight, really, in terms of the big issues. They're it.
I particularly enjoy your podcast as being more intellectual. Some of them. I mean, there's some that are really great and very down to earth. Man
Must
on the
be
street.
the guests.
Definitely the guests. But, there's just getting into the philosophy of why conservatism and understanding the philosophies that we're not interested in or find differences with, and exploring those properly. Your conversations with Bill on those were very good and expositional. And they're very, very instructional for especially young players who are just wanting to explore politics a little bit more and just understand things. Yeah, it's very, very, very good. And I'm
It's the
just absolutely
big thing,
chuffed
Dave.
you want to be
Just to
part
say
of the
that
Good Source team.
the big thing, Dave, is that I see, and Karina would know exactly what I'm talking about here, being involved in the Liberal Party for so long. I mean, you see people in politics these days, and they just go whichever way the wind's blowing. I mean, there is no foundation, there is no principle, there is no understanding of the core issues or an understanding of, I guess, first principles. And we've got to have an understanding of that if we're to have any hope at all. I actually, as I said, I'm a real pessimist. I've reached the point in which I think that actually Western civilization may have run its course. And I think that actually we're living in that end moment where basically we're eating ourselves. We are eating ourselves. But we'll see. That doesn't mean we should just give up, obviously. The end of civilization is not the end of the world. It's just the end of the world as we know it. And,
it's very dark,
will come after that.
George.
Yeah, it is dark, but it's all, I mean, who here would disagree that it doesn't look like we are
Daniel McCarthy agrees with you?
But it'd be interesting to see who else in the panel doesn't agree that it looks like very much that we are in the final throes of Western civilization. Absolutely, there are people out there that want it to end, and the trajectory is just going that way in a rapid rate.
What do you think, Karina?
Yeah, Judge, do you think, though, that when you see politicians capitulating to the views of the left, that's because they are the popular views or appear to be popular because they are the ones that are being vocalised? And it's because there has been a lack of conservative voices really rising up. Good sources like this, but also, as Dave, as you mentioned, the people in that, the Canberra Press Gallery asking the questions they do, it makes it out to be that those are the views of the public and that those are the concerns. I remember during the same-sex marriage plebiscite walking the halls of Parliament and just seeing posters of, yes and marriage equality on, pretty much every politician's door. Those that weren't supporting yes just had nothing. And it was I just thought, how difficult would it be for, politicians like yourselves to be able to just continue standing your ground when it seems like this insurmountable, volume of people speaking against what you are promoting, when in actual fact, the quiet Australians are just, sitting back and just watching what's happening and not getting involved. So I think that is why such a platform is so important at this time. I mean, I agree, things can go two ways. We could see Western civilization fall over, but on the other hand, I do see, and I mentioned this in my article, population growth that we'll see coming through immigration. A lot of it will be coming from countries where people generally are conservative-minded, from Asia, from the Middle East, from Africa. When we see that happening, perhaps it will be the migrants, much like the missionaries who went from, colonial countries, from England to Africa, Asia, and the Middle East. Now they're sending their people to Australia. Perhaps you could see it that way as an analogy, and maybe that will change the cultural tide. That's my hope, anyways.
Well, I hope so. I hope that I'm wrong. I really do hope that I'm wrong. But I think that what you're talking about, that process has been going on for some time, where people on the right just remain silent, don't speak up enough. I am guilty, mea culpa, mea maxima culpa. I have done the same thing. I actually, like all the other politicians, bite my tongue sometimes and don't say exactly what I want to say, for fear that you're going to say something that's just going to get you dragged through the mud by the mainstream media. That just feeds in on itself. The less people speak up, it's a vicious cycle. It'll just keep on spinning until it's silent. So that's why the good source is definitely needed, if nothing but a Pyrrhic fight back.
George, why did you resign from your position as party whip in the Nationals federally?
Couldn't stand Malcolm Turnbull and being in an executive position as part of his government. That's the real reason. But quite honestly, it was just untenable. The point where I was, every day getting up and tweeting or putting a Facebook post or a press release out criticising something that his government had done, and holding, a very minor executive position in that government. But that's why I did it.
That wasn't even worth the money for you.
Oh, well, if you get into politics for the money, then you're probably in the wrong game. But if you get into politics for friends too, Marika, because I heard something you said before about how many 80s you get. There's an old saying in politics: if you want a friend, bring a dog.
Yeah.
Hey, George, I reckon a lot of people would agree totally with you, and I think a lot of people would definitely support everything you've said. I guess a question I have, and maybe this is to you too, Karina, at what point will the Liberal Party actually revoke Malcolm Turnbull's membership?
That's something for the New South Wales division. He's a member there.
Because it just seems like he is the greatest enemy to the Liberal Party.
The story that goes on, though, if I can jump in, is that what I hear is that this is what he actually wants, that he is continually doing stuff to try and get the party to expel him, so that he can be seen as a martyr, as a new Malcolm Fraser or someone like that. So I don't know. I think that he's liberal in name only at the moment. If he ever was anything but.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Any thoughts, James?
I think Malcolm Turnbull should be allowed to keep on speaking. The more he speaks, the better Scott Morrison looks. Why would you want to silence him?
Yeah.
It's the craziest idea. Let him keep talking.
Yeah.
Can I ask James a question, though, David? Like with my very pessimistic view, is one thing I find that sometimes Christians push back, and I'm interested in your view because of some of the stuff that I've read from you on this topic. But just because I believe the West's falling doesn't mean that I'm, dejected and depressed about the Christian hope. I had this discussion with a Christian one time who was really angry that I was saying this, and I said, well, Jesus didn't come to save Western civilization, so there's no correlation between the two. So I'm just interested in your theological understanding of this issue that I'm talking about.
Could you summarise the question a little more?
The fall of Western civilization, do you think that we're in it or not, and how do you think that plays out in connection with Christianity?
I think the West has been on a downhill trajectory ever since Big Brother was on primetime television. I think that was the moment I really started to worry. Look, the truth is, prosperity has always been the enemy of the church. The church has always advanced in difficult times, and so for a believer, whilst the undermining of Western civilization will make us uncomfortable, it certainly doesn't make us pessimistic in terms of the future of the church and the gospel message. The more difficult the times, the more the gospel message finds residence in the hearts of people. So as a believer, obviously for your children, you want our lifestyle to go on and just improve forever. Who wouldn't? But in terms of the kingdom of God, the darker it gets, the brighter the light. And so I think that's why Christians can be at the same time incredibly pessimistic and optimistic all at once. I'm incredibly pessimistic about the world, and as I read the Bible, there's a great message of pessimism concerning the world, but I'm incredibly optimistic concerning the kingdom of God and the future of the church. And I think as a believer, you hold those two things at the same time. They're not in contradiction. They actually are parallel.
We're going to have to get you a Pellowe Talk mug, George, or maybe I should just make Good Source mugs now.
I got to say, this one was from my wife, actually. I'm not showing this side.
Loudest
Snorer.
Okay. The reflection was blocking that. Loudest. Yep. So I had somebody call, I think this was funny, from Marcus. Marcus has been on the panel before. Malcolm Turnbull is not a Liberal Party person, but ALP in French cuffs. That's, French cuffs. Yeah. Okay. Well, I thought it was funny, Marcus. Apparently it's you and me, mate.
Let's face it, Malcolm Turnbull's Labour light. So.
Green light. Awesome. Well, look, I think on the pessimistic view of things, question mark. It's up to us. I think it could definitely be the end of Western civilization, but I don't think it's too late. I think is a comment in here from MJack: salt and seasons and preserves from decay, and that is certainly the Christian's job. Look, and just a little caveat, everybody, I'm a Christian. I think everybody on the panel tonight and the main contributors are Christians. But as I said before, it's free speech environment. We're really happy for anybody to argue anything. It's not a Christian channel per se. We're just a channel that pursues truth. And I'm happy to have any policy grounded in fact, reason, logic, data, evidence. And I think that's a really great way to go, and a big believer in democracy. It will be up to Christ to implement theocracy, not me. And that's probably a safe way to make that happen, because if I do it, then it's probably just a Davidocracy, which is a term I just made up. You will not find in any political or theological handbooks.
Pellocracy.
A Pellocracy? Pelloweocracy. We'll workshop this and come back to you with the new government structure for Australia. But yeah, Karina, what's your vision for your podcast, your show? What are you looking forward to and thinking about producing some of?
Well, I've been a contributor on a number of shows on Sky, on ABC, on radio, but always a contributor commenting on what's happened in politics in the world that week. I am so excited now to take the reins and actually be able to host my own show and exclusively, I suppose, push the viewpoint that I think is correct, my own, and
that's right.
And also to not only just provide a wrap up of the news, including the news that you may not see on mainstream media over the week, but also I'm hoping to do a bit of a law report if there are cases that come up each week that are significant for our society, to be able to discuss that as well, and I suppose raise awareness about what's going on. So I'm super excited.
Brilliant. Yeah, no, I'm looking forward to it very muchly as well. Just looking for the right button to bring back everybody's views. I'm talking away and you're still smiling there. It's very nice of you. Yes,
I am excited.
Marcus,
that's an excited smile.
It is. Look, everybody is having their own show. We're going to take some slowly. Marika's going to be having her own show. We'll ask her about that in a second, but it may take a couple of months to come through. Right now, Bill and Marika are definitely doing podcast only, articles and podcast, you'll be able to listen to their opinions and their explanation of things. And the more regular, the better. But we'll work towards that. And certainly, as we grow, the production team will be able to increase our production abilities. So, guys, I hope that tonight there's lots of people becoming supporters of the Good Source for just $10 a month. And you can do less or you can do a lot more. Hint, hint. Feel free. And look, if you can't do anything, there's no paywall. There's no obligation. I understand, and don't expect everybody to pay for it. This is an experiment in free market economics. I'm a believer in the free market. That doesn't necessarily mean the voluntary market, but at this stage, that's what it is. Don't want to stop anybody from accessing any of the content. If we have to later, that'll be unfortunate. But right now, the experiment is, can we get enough monthly support to have a high quantity of production and a high quality of production? So we'll be looking for ways we can be efficient. But certainly we need to build a production facility and office for 2 to 3 staff. And there's a bunch of people that we're going to be able to do live production for, and hopefully get to the point of, as I said earlier in the broadcast, start doing a nightly news bulletin, and give people a honest and fresh alternative to the mainstream media, where the journalists and presenters aren't anti-everything, which is so much of what we see going on right now. And I think that's part of resisting the collapse of Western civilization. I hate to be awfully dramatic about a website like the Good Source, but ultimately this is what it is. If we want to preserve the great institutions like the Fourth Estate, a free media, I was personally devastated by the lack of scrutiny from the media during the initial COVID crisis. It's just incredibly large amounts of people who were not holding the government to account while taking vast swathes of our freedoms away from us without proper scrutiny. Maybe it was the right or wrong thing to do. I'm just saying the media were MIA. They were all of a sudden very complicit and all singing from the same songbook, and it seemed like almost nobody was willing to come out and go, hang on. So that's something that we should be able to do. Any thoughts? Where was I? I've lost my train of thought. Somebody jump in and take control.
Dave, I'll jump in.
Thanks, Bernie.
I put a podcast up on the Good Source with you just on Sunday. I think it went up about COVID-19. I do think that no one has been asking the proper questions. Like, for instance, what is the point of our current plan, which seems to be focused on eradicating coronavirus from Australia, if all it means is that we've got to keep the border shut forever and look over the fence at the rest of the world, and every time a case inevitably comes to Australia again, or there's an outbreak like we're seeing in Victoria now, everything's got to shut down again. It's time to start looking at how we can just factor in this disease into our medical system like any other disease that we deal with already. And it's time to start letting people take their own decisions about the risks of dealing with this disease. But no one's been asking these questions at all. The media's been focused on running 24/7 panic and hysteria since February.
Yeah, look, I agree with what Bernard's saying. I think the really interesting story that's coming out of COVID is the role of the World Health Organization. I think as George and I think Karina was saying before, I think also the Chinese Communist Party, COVID-19, I think, has been a huge wake-up to the world in that regard. I think George made this comment. I think your words were, George, that, you know, communist China is the existential threat that we're facing in the West. And I know there's been some really good politicians like Andrew Hastie who have been sounding this alarm for quite a while. I can even see in the, you know, in the comment section, a lot of people have, you know, been really concerned. You know, how on earth did we as a government, you know, see the port of Darwin to the Chinese? You know, there's really huge, significant questions of national sovereignty that we need to ask. But, you know, I think just getting back to the comment at the start, the role of the media and what it plays here is really important. I just published an article in the Canberra Declaration today, as well as in Cauldron Pool, about what Trump had initially said about the role of the malaria drug in not as a cure, obviously, but as part of a strategy in combating COVID. And he was roundly condemned, you know, by a lot of people in the media, particularly CNN. And the study that the WHO relied on, and it was actually published in the Lancet and also in the journal, you know, the New England Journal for Medicine, was actually based on really shoddy research and has actually been now retracted. In fact, two of the people that they said were involved in the research, one was a science fiction writer and the other was an adult / quote, adult content provider. Make of that what you will. You know, and now there's studies coming out that it looks like Trump was actually correct, that this is actually a helpful way forward. The issue here is not so much Trump and what he does and doesn't say, but the media and the media bias. And I think that's why shows like The Good Source are so important, is because I think, as you know, as Australians, I think we've realised for quite a while now, conservatives just don't get a fair go in the media. And that's a great shame. You know, like, I mean, what we've got here tonight is a who's who of people that are just willing to speak up and more often than not just say what a lot of other people are thinking and just make common sense all that more common. And it's great, Dave, that you've, you know, initiated this project of having a show like this, because it just means that people have got the opportunity now to not just be siloed and hear things that just agree with their own perspective. Because I think, like you've said, this is about freedom of speech and respectfully hearing each other's opinion. But it's just that, isn't it? It's providing a forum in which we can respectfully debate and we can respectfully disagree. And you can actually hear both sides to the argument. I think that's really, really important.
Yeah, thanks, Mark. Well, let's start bringing this home. Are there any other final thoughts? Have we got a plan for the show from everybody tonight? Has everybody had a chance to have a chat about that? George, are we going to start seeing your interviews possibly videoed?
You will. The hope is over the course of the next fortnight to get those podcasts in video format so that you can have them up on the Good Source, and we might also be contributing something else on a regular basis as well. A bit of a rant on just the issues from... We call them
editorials. Look, one of the things I want to advertise as we request your support financially to make the production constant, continuous and increasing, so that we can redeem the media in Australia, buy it back. The government's not going to give us money. We're going to have to compete with... redeemed by replacement, displacement, if you like. So, look, one of the things I'm going to look forward to doing with you all is these kind of maybe election night coverages where we all get on and we can share different websites and see what's happening and talk about the next state election in Queensland, October 31. Maybe we can get on and also talk about the New Zealand election with a couple of Kiwis. Not sure how gripping that will be for a bunch of Aussies, but there's a bunch of Kiwis living here too. And so one of the things that you're going to get to do when you're a financial supporter, I said there's no paywall, but there's going to be some bonus content for financial supporters, and they're already enjoying that. There's a Good Source supporters group on Facebook, and it's private. Only financial supporters are invited into that group. Nobody else can see what goes on there. But what you will get in there, just as a bonus and as a thank you, hopefully the whole platform is what you're investing in. What you're going to get is behind the scenes access. It's like a backstage access into the recordings. So before the formal recording starts, there's a bit of conversation that goes on. And after we say cut, there's a bit of conversation that goes on. You'll get to see all of that, and you'll get to see the interviews first and unedited, without all the polish and promotion on it a bit later. Of course, you'll get to see the later bit as well, but you'll get to see it first, unedited, raw, and those more intimate conversations behind the scenes. So if that's something that interests you, it's an extra reason why you should become a financial supporter of the Good Source. So in just wrapping it up, Good Source, good, SAUCE.news is our website. .news allows us to not be branded with just one country. We're all Australian, but we're wanting to add contributors from New Zealand as well, and expand into, because the topics that we're talking about are really universal to the West. The West and the traditions and foundations that we've been built on are under attack all over. So Jennifer Marahasi, does anybody have her contact details, Dr. Jennifer Marahasi?
I do, and in fact, Dr. Ridd was my last interview subject on Conservative One, so I have contact details for both Jennifer and Peter. Yeah,
we'll get Peter on again. It's been a while since he's been on Pellowe Talk. Don't forget, guys, there's going to be a diversity of things. If you're looking for content, then certainly look up all of these guys, because there's a lot of back episodes and articles from everyone here. Look, there's one comment that's been coming up tonight, which was something about persecuted Christians. And the organizations that look after them. Look, that's a huge issue for me. I think it's very, very important for Christians to be aware of exactly how much physical suffering the body of Christ goes under around the world. The most persecuted people group in the world are Christians. It's very hard, perhaps, for us to understand and appreciate that in a Christian culture like the West, traditionally and historically. But nevertheless, that is the case. One of the reasons it's probably not possible to have those very decent organizations on the show is it's hard for them to be associated with a political platform. They need to be very non-partisan in such a way. So definitely welcome to have those conversations. There's a couple of people I might be able to convince to help us talk about that, because it really is important global news. The kind of suffering that goes on around the world, and it's just mind-blowing what people are still doing to people simply because of their faith in some of those countries that President Trump wouldn't describe too affectionately. But Marcus Fu wants to talk about the New Zealand election, so that's great. We'll try and make that happen. There's a couple of people we're in conversations with. So cool. Well, we're going to wrap it up. Is there a final word from anybody? 2 or 3 people. Just any final thoughts?
I want you to call the behind the scenes stuff extra sauce.
Extra sauce, hot sauce. That's awesome. Look, thank you very much to the viewers for watching tonight. Thank you to everyone who's subscribing to the mailing list to get those regular updates. Those people who are supporting and becoming weekly and monthly financial contributors to the production of the Good Source. We hope to make a really big sauce factory for you all. So that'll be that'll be cool. Look, thank you to the panel again. Thank you to the team. Thank you to Lyle, who couldn't be here tonight, sending us his thoughts, etc. Don't forget to get his book, I kid you not, Notes from 20 Years in the Trenches of the Culture Wars. That's available from lyleshelton.com. .au. Not sure if it doesn't work with one, try the other. But yeah, that's awesome. So thank you very much, and we will see you back here again, exactly the same place at 8 p.m. Eastern States, 6 p.m. Western States, and 10 p.m. in Perth. And jump onto the Good Source and make sure you find out where each of these guys' shows is going to be available to catch up. And tell your friends, share it, and let's displace the media in Australia. Good night, everyone.
Good night.